Oh, there I am. All right, it's been 2 weeks. I guess kind of struck me. It's been 2 weeks, and I said, "Oh, that's right. It was Thanksgiving." So I had a good Thanksgiving. We have a very small family. Um, this year it was just me, my wife, and my daughter. So it was a lot of food. I don't regret it, but I would have little doubt that I am possibly over 300 now. I've been pushing 299, and I'm sure, hopefully, just briefly, Thanksgiving put me over. I really got to start exercising and getting in shape. I'm also a lazy shaver. So here we are. We are back again. Hopefully I can entertain you with my musings. What are we going to talk about tonight? We are going to talk about James McGrath and more Madebyjimbob. It's kind of odd trying to look at the camera sometimes and focus on the screen. But so I had an encounter with James McGrath. James McGrath is a professor of religion. He actually doesn't live technically too far from me. I mean, maybe an hour or so away. And I first encountered him in a post-debate roundtable. It was audio only, at least the way I listened to it, with him and Neil Godfrey and maybe David Fitzgerald, following the Ehrman Price debate. The reason I put it in scare marks is because Price really didn't show up to debate, and he didn't seem to have much interest in actually debating. He just wanted to talk. So I was rather disappointed in that. Honestly, I think with preparation, I could have done a better job than Robert Price. So regardless, that's the first time I encountered James McGrath. And I noted in listening to the conversation that he was just very passionate about disagreeing with the mythicist position. And I found him on Facebook and friended him, and a couple of times he commented on my post. I had read a book by, shoot, it just had in my head. He seems to have abandoned active writing, but yeah, he's his name is right on the tip of my but anyway, he's Australian or from New Zealand, and he wrote a couple books. I've read two of them, and one of them was covering the historicity of Jesus, and he ended up saying he was a Jesus agnostic. He didn't think the evidence really swayed him whether Jesus existed or whether Jesus didn't exist. And James McGrath commented on some of those posts I made, and that's about it. So the reason he and I interacted recently is because on MythVision, I think it was MythVision, Richard Carrier and someone else, whom I didn't even recognize their name when they posted it, we're going to have a debate about, I think it was whether Jesus fulfilled Jewish prophecy. And so McGrath commented, let me screen share this. There we go. You can make that bigger. A little bit. That could take me out That doesn't seem to make much difference. Okay, so hopefully it's big enough for you to read. So McGrath commented and he said, how can a Jesus that didn't exist get this wrong? Richard Carey is an odd choice to be in this, because the debate, of course, was going to take the assumption that Jesus existed. So I replied, a person can adopt a position for a discussion. I've done it. I'm an atheist, but I had a debate where I adopted that a God existed, from deist to a specific religion. And the debate was, what is the correct religion? And my opponent lost horribly because he did not demonstrate any religion was correct. So then we have this goober land, Jesus existed, so-called fact. And McGrath backs him up on Jesus existing. And I said, it's not a fact, it's consensus. And James McGrath, he says, in the sense that nothing in ancient history is more than probabilistic certain, sure. Okay, so it's not a fact. But convenient shorthand, i.e. lying, there is no serious doubt that there was a man named Joshua who caused some ripples in this time, an individual executed by the Romans, and whose followers managed to continue. His followers, who, according to the followers' own documents, thrived in the same city where he got executed. The Romans didn't seem to worry about them, but that's a discussion for another time. Then I clarify, that this is an individual whom they have no idea why he was executed nor what he actually did. And if one eliminates Josephus, the historicists really had no ground to stand on. And even some historicists have legitimate arguments that Josephus did not mention Jesus. And so then McGrath just goes on some more. You're not seriously going to argue X must be true. I saw a YouTube video. No, the thing is, and he points out, it's the YouTube video. So no, I think Jacob Berman on History Valley had an actual scholar, someone with a degree, saying that Josephus didn't. So, that would be a scholar that James McGrath seems to appeal to in his defense that might say that. And I don't know anything about that scholar. I don't know if he's an outlier, but and then I called him a condescending cad because he sits there and goes on, yeah, well, you're not going to argue this, are you? Gosh, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I'm older than James, and quite possibly I've been studying Christianity longer than him. Not longer than he's been alive, but longer than him. So, he shouldn't be so condescending. He's always condescending with mythicists. And I said, I'll be happy to debate you live. And I say, James, the brother of the Lord, is a metaphor. Demonstrate that it cannot be so. And he said, there's rarely a possibility of demonstrating something to be impossible. Okay. Why are you so hard-headed about this then? It doesn't have to be impossible that aliens built the pyramid, just like less likely than alternatives. That's a bit of a difference. It's a bit different saying, okay, this phrase is a metaphor and aliens built the pyramids. But he often jumps to these exaggerated comparisons that totally lack it away. That James, the brother of Jesus, is a metaphor is unlikely if you pay attention to the slightest context. Well, let's look at the slightest context. So I won't pull it up because I didn't have it ready. So this was in is it Corinthians? No, Galatians 1:19. And that's where Paul says, contrary to Acts, that he didn't meet with anybody, that he only saw Peter and James, the brother of the Lord. As I understand it, Greek has no definite article, so it's no the brother of the Lord. It's just James, brother of the Lord. Although many translations do put the in there. But however, if they're going to do that, then, for example, when Paul mentions Apollo in 1 Corinthians 16:12, it's Apollo tau adelphal. So that would be Apollos the brother, which is kind of strange. But he wants to make an exception for, that's not Apollo the brother of the Lord, but McGrath wants to make an exception of the usage of brother there and not when it applies to James. And if you really look at Paul's usage of brother, it always means a follower of Christ or a Christian before that term was developed. And there are two places where Paul says, he calls James brother of the Lord, and he calls some of his fellow Christians some of his fellow Christian, the brothers of the Lord, that they took wives with them. And some have determined that is a reference to Jesus's other brothers, such as Jude and all them. Note, however, that in the letters attributed to James and Jude, neither one of them say, I'm the brother of Yeshua, or I'm the brother of the Christ. Neither one of them say. And if James was actually the brother of Jesus, in the Jewish context, he would have inherited standing from being Jesus's brother. And it's unknown whether he is the lost my train of thought. It's unknown whether he is I guess I'm just going to lose my train of thought. I'm very tired, but I was going to jump in and do this anyway. So anyway, James does not have to be literally the brother of Jesus. For one thing, it's brother of the Lord. Paul uses Lord to apply to Jesus and God. So that's why I think it's metaphorical, because I don't think Paul would anyway be wanting to attribute a sibling to God, even metaphorically. That's what I was going to say. If James were the brother of Jesus, that would have given him standing. And any conflict Paul had with James, Paul would have zero standing. Paul didn't even, if Jesus existed, Paul didn't even know Jesus. So therefore, James would have much higher standing, and Paul would have no argument. And anybody, if that were the historical narrative, anybody that knew anything about Jesus, and Paul comes along and says, well, James, he's wrong. Oh, he's so much into the law. That's wrong. No, James would rule. James's word would have vast priority over Paul. So that's an awkward thing if he is literally the brother of Jesus. So anyway, just James McGrath is just so literal about this matter. And it's astounding. I tell him sometime in this, I do apologize for calling him a cad. But he linked me so many articles. And one of the articles he links to was on his, I think all of them are from the blog, but one of the first ones he linked to was just someone's opinion. And also note there's this Dr. Aaron Adair. I don't know what he's a professor or what his degree is in, but he is also a Jesus mythicist, and I really like some of his arguments. He made some arguments that I've never heard before, and I've been studying this since 2000. So he's definitely a new person on the scene that we should take notice. But McGrath's not going to hear that. He's not going to. I bet he didn't even look up this Dr. Aaron Adair. Maybe he did. He can correct me. Oh, he unfriended me, by the way, just because of this exchange. Doherty isn't very persuasive if you know the source material. Okay, well, I do know the source material. I've been reading the Bible since I was at least 10 years old. That would be 1975. And I've studied it repeatedly. I've one of the heavy outside of the Bible, just reading just the Bible, one of the heavy investigation I did was the historical research for Jesus. John Dominic Crossan, Michael Grant, all those people, E.P. Saunders, all those people. And I pointed him out, Earl Doherty's responses to him. And then he goes again with this condescending attitude. Mythicists like young earth creationists and other denialists have a response to everything. The question is why mainstream experts overwhelmingly judge their claims and arguments unpersuasive. Well, one, anyone who is a Christian and a historian is less likely to be objectively look at this. It's possible they could. Now, there are several atheist historicists, so they don't, have a bias. But for the bulk of the 2000s, and some people will say actual history really wasn't done until starting in about 1950. I would say most people interested in the New Testament and the history of it were Christians. Then I point out, I do know the source material. Hand waving doesn't win the argument. And then I point out, do you also argue the consensus of theologians is that God exists? Atheists are wrong to believe otherwise. Okay. But he wants to compare young earth creationism with mysticism. Okay. For one thing, he's already admitted that in history, it's probabilistic. Okay. The age of the earth is probabilistic only in the sense that we can't get it down. We can get an approximate date, how old it is. But how far off that could be, I don't know, but it's insignificant in the larger picture of billions and billions of years. History is based on argumentation, and it depends on what the Jesus you say exists does. Young earth creationists ignore science. History is not science. It's more of an art. So he claims to be a Christian, and I was assuming that meant, and I think justifiably so, that he believes Jesus rose from the dead and God exists. So then he just waffles on, he says, historical study can never judge it probable that an individual rose from the dead and entered the age to come. And I agree. So why do you believe it? And he's like, well, if you have read what I've written on this and other topics over the past couple of decades and thus have no idea what my views are, kind of get caught up when we talk. Why don't you just answer the frickin' question, James? Just say it. Why do people play these little games? Just say your answer. It's like, oh my gosh, just answer the frickin' question. It would solve so many issues. So here I am going to this assumption that being a Christian means believing Jesus rose from the dead. A warranted position, because it does. So I told him to link me to his best argument, and he's like, I'm not sure which is best. Really? What kind of arguments do you have? Are they all the best? Are some better than others? I think most historians would say, this argument, this one's better than this one, even though this one is pretty good. So then I again ask him, why you believe a man rose from the dead. All I can say, just say, I don't. I don't. And he doesn't. Let's go to why he is a Christian. James McGrath, Religion Prof. The blog of James F. McGrath. Too bad it's not a T and it could be Tiberius. He's a Star Trek fan. So he thinks, doesn't like fundamentalists. I mean, say he didn't like them as people, but doesn't like their positions. Thinks the story of Jesus sending pigs is criticized, but he just thinks it's political satire, not literal. Cursing the fig tree, it didn't actually happen. Symbolic. Yeah, I agree. So why is he a Christian? So he says the short answer would be that it was within a Christian context that he had a life-changing religious experience. But he does not espouse biblical lyricism or inerrancy. So someone might ask why he is still a Christian. And he says, taking the Bible seriously is certainly no less Christian than quoting it selectively while pretending to believe it all and take it literally. And he mentions Marcus Borg, who I also read several books of, including his version of the historical Jesus. I think he called him a spirit man. So he says, like Marcus Borg, that he was born into it. You know, just like I'm an American, I was born into Christianity. And he values the positive elements. So he just essentially says, why am I Christian? Literally says, because he prefers to keep a tradition I have rather than discarding with the bathwater and then trying to make something new from scratch. Well, I think some Christians, James, would say that you have. You did discard it. If you, at one point, literally believed Jesus rose from the dead, and now you don't, you discarded it, and now you've built something from scratch. You have modified it to be something that it wasn't for the bulk of its history. So he's apparently not an atheist, and he's not a, I didn't even share that. Darn. Anyway, that was his, forget that I have to change this sometimes. I'm new. There we are. So anyway, here it was, and I'll just go to the bottom. Why am I a Christian? Because he prefers to keep the tradition he had. Okay, just so you know, I wasn't putting words in his mouth. So he's not a Christian, but he would not respond when I asked him why he believes in Christianity. Literally. He just wouldn't say, I don't. All right, there we go. So I tell him, he's like, you're not interested in what I actually think. I said, I literally asked you why you believe a man rose from the dead, and you accuse me of not being interested in what you think. Is this where you stand? Because, I think if someone says, why do you believe this? They're interested in what you say. And then if he said, I don't, I would say, oh. And we could have gone on from there, but no, he likes to play around, play these stupid little games. Let's see. So I think he's asked me for something like, do I have any writings? I'm like, no, I don't have a blog. Why don't I have a blog? And I was irrelevant. Okay, I just mean I don't have these writings composed. Tell him he can refer to Earl Doherty rebutting Ehrman. Pretty much, I agree with what Doherty says. And I tell him that 24 years ago, I read Doherty's entire website and then his book. And then I got a second book. But I was convinced after a year of studying his website that Jesus did not exist. And I was a mythicist because he keeps bringing up Carrier. I'm like, I was a mythicist 12 years before Carrier. And actually, I kind of prompted Carrier a bit to look into it. I won't say I'm the sole reason, but back on infidels.org. I point out that he's really poor at reading comprehension for a professor. So what he's saying is, you embrace pseudo scholarship that no one who works professionally in a relevant field finds persuasive. And then I tell him he's essentially committing a logical fallacy. Even Ehrman says that Doherty seems like an intelligent person and has a good grasp of Koine Greek. But McGrath is just going to say, well, that's pseudo scholarship. He just dismisses it, and that's the genetic fallacy. He's saying this is false because it doesn't come from people that I like. And I point out, if one is ignorant, I have no problem with you relying on scholars. If you want to say, I haven't studied this, I'm just going to say Jesus exists because historians say he did, fine. Just note that if you're religious, they don't think the Jesus you believed in existed. And I really don't know what he thinks you have to be familiar with. You got the Bible, you have Josephus, you have the early church fathers, you have Tacitus, you have some non-canonical Christian texts. So what else do you one need to be familiar with? What else? What else, James? What else? There's not really a lot to it. And I've read all of them multiple times. So then I just wanted to ask him, clarify, which is more probable, that Jesus didn't exist or Jesus rose from the dead. And I don't think he ever answers it. What is the point of comparing what is intrinsically improbable to what is improbable in light of the evidence? Okay. So I guess in a roundabout way, he did answer it. But he still won't. He says all this is probability, but he won't give a number to it. And he just got tired of the roundabout way he addresses things. Just answer it. And he asked if I was going to pretend that I didn't answer his question. I'm still under the assumption that being a Christian means you accept Jesus rose from the dead. We could have avoided all this if he would have just answered it straight up, and I instead had to go to his blog to find out. And he says it's been such a waste of time, and I tell him, no, you're the issue. You've been the waste of time because you've just played these little games and you won't answer a straight question. And we could have avoided 2 pages of this, 2 screenshots, if you just would have straight up admitted what you said or what your position was on the resurrection. So I think, once again, do you believe Jesus rose from the dead? There's nothing to possibly justify affirming that as a historical event. And so I do not affirm that it happened. As I indicated earlier, no, you didn't. You just kind of played around. You're just trying to avoid scrutiny of your denialism through distraction. That hopefully tells onlookers what they need to know about mythicism. Thank you again. It's all just a little game for him that he wants to win. I was hoping we could have some sort of a discussion. So then I tell him, okay, so you're claiming Christians are not justified for believing that. That means you are not a Christian. And make my little quip. And so here goes. So you are now deciding that liberal Christians aren't Christians, which you have no authority to do. And you're pretending I didn't write a chapter by chapter review of Doherty's appalling book while not addressing the topic. Okay, we've had this conversation over an hour or so. So I'm not going to sit here and read your chapter by chapter review of Doherty's appalling book. Actually, James, I did read it a long time ago, and I thought it was pretty crappy. And when I don't have something to address on this channel, I would probably start looking into your awful arguments and show you just how awful they are. At least let the audience know. So then I'd like to read this to you guys. There used to be Yoo-hoo groups, and in those groups, Earl Doherty was part of them. I wish I had been a fly on a wall in these groups, but Doherty defended his thesis against other historicists, and a lot of people were doing like McGrath. Maybe McGrath was one of them, I don't know, and deriding Doherty's position. And this Professor Stevan Davies of Misericordia University, I think I copied and pasted that. So, and he's an author of Jesus the Healer, which was a contribution to historical Jesus studies, wrote this in response to people getting on Doherty. So he said, I haven't read Thomas Kuhn in the Kuhn's Age, but recall something to the effect that a prevailing scientific paradigm gradually accumulates problematic elements that are swept under the rug until a new paradigm appears, accounting for those elements, at which time it becomes clear, where it did not before, that those problematic elements should have indicated fatal flaws in the formal paradigm. Earl Doherty's paradigm is a paradigm. It's not simply a reworking of the usual materials in the usual way to come up with a different way of understanding them. It's not an awful lot different than the claim there is no such thing as phlogiston. Fire comes about through an entirely different mechanism. New paradigms are very rare. I thought that my Jesus the Healer gave a new paradigm rather than just another view on the subject, but no, Earl's is what a new paradigm looks like, and he's not the first to advance it. What the hell? A new paradigm asserts not that much of what you know is wrong, but that everything you know is wrong, more or less. Not that much of what you know is wrong. Okay? Your whole perspective is wrong. The simple thing to do is nothing to do with such a notion, which simple thing has been violently asserted on crosstalk by various people. Indeed, at the outset of this discussion, more than one person asserted that since this is a historical Jesus list, we presuppose the historical Jesus, therefore a contrary paradigm should not be implemented on the list. I think this is cognate of the establishment's reaction to Galileo. But it's not that Earl advocates lunacy in a manner devoid of learning. He advocates a position that is well argued based on the evidence and even shows substantial knowledge of Greek. But it cannot be true, you say. Why not? Because it simply can't be true, and we shouldn't listen to what can't be true. No, not so quick. The more you think about early Christianity from the perspective of the new paradigm, the more the old paradigm can be seen to be flawed, and the more rather incoherent efforts to make those flaws disappear seem themselves flawed. Ptolemaic astronomy does work, sort of, if you keep patching it up. So we can say that the host of historical Jesus scholars haven't gotten it right, but we know that they are going on about it more or less the right way because it's the only way we know of. Or indeed, we say that historical Jesus scholars are going about a task that is just impossible, but still their goal is, in theory, however impossible in practice, the right goal. Really? This isn't to guarantee that Earl's arguments are always correct. I'm not at all pleased with the redating of Mark, etc., or that he's thought of everything. The normative Jesus who was Galilean Jew, whose followers immediately were subject to persecution by the Pharisee Paul, are huge holes the standard paradigm just ignores, but he's thought of a lot. You cannot advance very far in thinking if you simply refuse to adopt a new paradigm and see where it takes you. Even if ultimately you reject it, the adoption of it, or at least the effort to argue against it, will take you to places you have not seen before. Hence, Goranson, an intelligent, knowledgeable person, thus the foil for this letter, is wrong. Stephen Carlson's objections to Earl on the grounds that Mark is evidence for historical Jesus just takes the standard paradigm and asserts it. That's one way of going about it, as pointing to the self-evident fact that the sun goes around the earth will nicely refute Copernicus, but it's not that simple. But in going along with Earl, I've learned more than by going along with anybody else whose ideas I've come across anywhere. I went along with Mark Goodacre and learned some there. Refusing to go along, refusing to argue against, being happy that nothing new is being discussed except widgets of modification to the standard paradigm, that's where you really learn almost nothing. Crossan or Johnson, Allison or Sanders can give you slightly different views of the standard view, Earl gives a completely different view. His is a new paradigm. Theirs are shifts in focus within the old paradigm. From whom will you learn more? Well said. So any Christians listen to this, tell me, can you claim to be a Christian if you don't believe Jesus rose from the dead? No one comes to me, no one comes to the Father except through me, lest a man is born again. For God so loved the world that he sent his only son. I mean, it's not me, James. It's the Bible that says all this stuff. So I think that was about the end of it. A few days later, he unfriended me. Oh, well, I mean, if he wants to be one of those people that doesn't learn, that's on him. I covered this briefly during all that. This is on James McGrath's blog again about the brother of the Lord. And here he is with this monolithic thinking. He cannot simply mean James the Christian. Really? I mean, I can grant, I won't say that he cannot mean literally Jesus' brother, but McGrath will not even accept that as a possibility. No, he cannot. No, he cannot. And he thinks it's because it wouldn't make context. Well, how are you assuming the context? You're assuming the context is saying who is the brother. He wants to designate James. There could have been two James. There was James, one of the pillars, and there was James, who was just a brother of the Lord. That would be the distinguishing. He wanted to make sure that they weren't thinking he was meaning James the pillar. That right there answers it as a possibility. So just this monolithic thinking irritates me, especially in history. You just can't have it that way. So back to Jimbob. I got 20 minutes if I try to make my thing. I found this. I was looking for stuff on Andrew Wilson, and I found this thing from a Fresh and Fit thing, and Andrew Wilson is there, and so is Jimbob. And I just thought it was Chrome tab. There it is. All right, so these guys are apparently talking about what is success, and this one guy. I don't know, make this bigger. Theater mode. Okay, hope this will be big enough. Does that make it bigger? Yeah, it does. Okay. Make sure the sound is going through.
Lows and the highest highs.
Well, what's the distinction? After you make X amount, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you look at these studies done on this, it does not.
I don't fit no fucking studies.
It does not
bro.
hugely improve a person's life.
Are you proud of who the fuck
bro,
you are?
Why
well, look at. Are you proud? If you look in the mirror, would you guys say this motherfucker's proud of who the fuck he is? That's a bag of trash, dude. Pull your fucking shirt
because
off.
I've been.
Tell me you're fucking proud. Because
So yeah, that guy's a complete asshole. I mean, look at him. He's all buff and everything. He just thinks he's a badass. Apparently, he's been to prison. Woo, I'm scared. So he gets up here and he gets all physical with. Why can't I make this full screen? Apparently I can't. So he gets all physical.
I've been to fucking prison.
Jesus Christ!
Because
look
I've been
at
to
you,
prison?
bro. You got 10-inch arms and tits.
So this guy's been to prison. Just usually nothing to be proud of. And he's going to make fun of Andrew. I mean, okay, Andrew's not ripped. I wouldn't call him fat. I don't think he has moobs. I don't know. I can't tell. I don't know how this guy can tell. But that's the guy's rebuttal. His entire rebuttal is, oh, you're fat and you got tits. Andrew takes it pretty well. And Jimbob's right next to him.
Men don't have tits.
No, they go to prison where they get fucking
Fuck yeah,
where they
they
get
do.
raped up the ass.
You've never been to prison. Look,
That's
you're
what
talking about shit you
happens.
don't know.
They go to prison where they get raped.
Now you get your ass beat in front
You
of
think that
everybody.
that's better? You think that that's better?
So I like Jimbob, he's just sitting over there, and this guy's going to physically threaten Andrew, and Andrew handles it pretty well. I mean, I just laugh at him too, because even if he does, that's a fight I can't lose. I'm 59, I'm out of shape, I'm old, I'm overweight, so that's a fight I can't lose. Because if he beats me up, I'm like, ooh, okay. Yeah, you be proud of yourself, buddy. I'm sure a lot of people will pat you on the back, say good fight. Or, if by chance somehow I got a good hit in and beat him, oh, he'd really be embarrassed then. So maybe that's the type of thinking Andrew is. He's like, this is a fight I can't lose.
Let's let him give his definition of success. And then,
Having tits and 10-inch arms is what a man is.
Let's let him.
Please
get his,
don't listen to that.
Wes, let's let him.
Really? 10-inch arms. Okay.
Get his thing out, and then
Tits.
We can have different opinions.
Yeah.
Titties.
Anyway, back to where I was at.
Boobs.
Yeah. Okay. Prison. But anyway, if you want to follow the successful mantra of a man who tells you he's reformed from prison, understand why they might have gone there to begin with. And yes, I do think that a rejection of materialism is something missing in society. And I do think that true wealth is the family. And I think that true wealth is having a wife, and true wealth. That is what I think it is. And that is what I think truly success is being able to go home and look your family in the face and know that you're doing everything you can to support them. That's
then
what
when
I
you
think
go to the beach
success
with
is.
your family, they're like, there's my stud dad right there standing there.
Do you have
that stud right there with his shirt off?
Do you have children?
Look at that stud.
Do you have children?
I do have children.
How many?
I have 2.
You have 2. So are you saying that your Bugatti and your money and everything else is
saw
worth
me
more
standing
than your
there, they'd be
children?
like, my dad's a superhero. Look what he brought to the table. Look how hard this guy works. He came from nothing to this.
Yeah.
He's God damn it.
You're still whining. Stop whining
that
and
is
just
a
make an
product.
argument.
Dude, I'll smack your fat ass.
So you're gonna attack.
Straight
You're gonna
up.
attack me?
All right.
But dude, nobody's
All right.
Do you
whining.
usually attack
This
armed
is
men
how
in
I
Florida?
talk, bro. Dude,
All right.
look
Let's
at
just-
your goddamn self.
Okay,
Guys.
well,
So, I thought Andrew had handled himself well. That guy's a freaking asshole. And in my estimation of what a man is, I don't think he's much of a man. Whoever that tattooed guy is, I agree with Andrew. Nothing is more important than my family. And one of the posts this for 2 reasons. First, there's a lot of people who just can't recognize common ground with people they may disagree on 1 or 2 things. Andrew is not a fan of transgender, and he thinks women should basically stay home and have babies and cook for their husbands. And there can be all kinds of things that I would disagree with him on, but he's right in this instance, and I have no problem saying that I agree with him on this instance. Another thing which really popped in my head as I was rewatching this today is Andrew and Jimbob. Several times you can usually find Andrew on the whatever podcast talking to a bunch of women. They have said multiple times that women men are stronger than women, and women only have rights because men grant them to them. If men wanted to take them all away, they could. So women really don't have any rights because they only have rights that we grant them. Because anything a woman can do except for giving birth, men can do better, at least as far as physical things go. So here's the interesting quandary for Andrew and Jimbob. Now, Andrew stated he's armed. If it were my stage, nobody would be armed. But, okay, so this guy could have a gun too. So that kind of levels the playing field. But Andrew has also stated that if there were an army of men and an army of women, the men would win just because we're better at taking damage. So is this buff guy better at taking damage than Andrew? I don't know. But let's take weapons out of the equation. It is more likely that this guy would be able to beat up Andrew and that he could beat up Jimbob. He might even be able to beat both of them at the same time. I don't know. I don't know their skills. Might have ninja skills for all I know. So would we say that a certain number of men that are stronger than average men, that those weaker men only have rights because the stronger men give to them? So Andrew and Jimbob only have rights because stronger men like this guy allow them to have rights? It's food for thought, Andrew and Jimbob. It's food for thought. All right, let's see. 12 minutes to go. We will get to Jimbob. Woo! So Jimbob was kind enough to comment on my previous video. So he mentions here the problem of physicalism is simple. All known effects of physics are not truth-apt. Claiming propositions are effects of physics, but the only effect of physics with a truth-apt is special pleading. And I'll point out that most philosophers disagree with him, and perhaps even some theistic philosophers. And he says because 90% of current philosophers are physicalists. They disagree because they presuppose physicalism, dude. Physicalism is a precept, not a conclusion. I don't know if they presuppose it or not. They may just go on the assumption because there's no evidence otherwise of like a God or anything. No, I don't know how to make this bigger. So let's see what truth-apt means. Truth-apt, in a Google search, a sentence is truth-apt if it can be used in a context to express a true or false proposition. Sentences that are not truth-apt include questions, commands, paradoxical sentences like this sentence is false, sentences that seem to make an assertion but may actually express attitudes or prescriptions. So unless Jimbob's bringing meta-ethics in, and I don't think he is, I just think he's talking in general, can physics, all right, let's say, the brain develops biologically. It evolved over millions of years. The better the brain, the more accurately it could survive and interpret reality and your senses. So you have a brain, and it evolved. And we eventually evolved. Well, actually, some animals have languages. So it was actually before our time that languages developed. We just have, as far as we know, more comprehensive languages. That's what philosophers do, is really they just take language and beat it to death. So the brain can produce sentences, and some of those sentences will be true and some will be false. That means those sentences are truth apt. So just like the brain can create questions, commands, paradoxical sentences, attitudes and prescriptions, it can produce sentences that are truth apt. I'm surprised they didn't include fiction. I really don't know the philosophical position on fiction, but we can produce fiction as well. So I have no idea why there's nothing logically impossible about truth apt sentences being produced with no God. There's nothing logically impossible about that. If Jimbob has evidence that can't be so, then he needs to present it. But instead, he just has an argument. And while I think arguments are useful, if they're not based on any evidence, then you have nothing. So let's go back to him. All right, so he doesn't care that 90% of philosophers are physicalists because he's poisoning the well, saying, well, they just presupp it anyway. I don't know if they do or not. Maybe they do. I had commented on his debate with Godless Engineer. There we go. It's much bigger. Okay. So he had a debate with Godless Engineer, which Godless Engineer rage quit on him. And a lot of these things, especially videos, I just don't sit and watch unless there's if a scholar gives a video presentation and they have a lot of screens to show, then I'll watch it. But if it's just talking heads, I'll just listen to it in the car or while I work. So he stated Godless Engineer had his wife in the background calling us all idiots. I'm actually not sure if she called him idiot. I think she said, she may have, but I think she said, I do know, she said they're all dumb. So here's the situation. They had this debate, and so I went and searched the transcript and found the spots. Jimbob told Godless Engineer to shut his wife up, and Sarah, the host, told Jimbob to stop it. That was around 2:02 minutes in, 2 hours and 2 minutes. So just before 18 minutes, Godless Engineer did mute himself, and he's sitting there talking to his wife. You can see him on screen. So we don't know what they were saying to each other. And do I think it's disrespectful? Yes. But on Jimbob's show, while he's talking to people, if he doesn't like what they're saying, even if they're sincere, he will bring up his little GIFs. And yes, I say GIFs, darn it. I don't care if the originator says it's supposed to be GIF. It's graphic interface, so it's GIF. Becky and Alex Jones, with or without their knowledge, he does that. And I think when it's without their knowledge, it's even more insulting. So I don't know on what grounds Jimbob is getting upset about when he does similar things. I mean, was it something agreed to before the debate? So yes, I think both Godless Engineer and Jimbob Godless engineer in this situation was being disrespectful, and Jimbob is often disrespectful. In about 129, you can hear Godless engineer talking to his wife. And so since I was listening to it, doing stuff, driving or whatever, I was doing both because it was a long discussion. I said, yeah, that was rude. He should mute if he wants to talk to somebody else. And then around 156, his wife says something to him, and I point out that she should be respectful and leave him alone while he's doing his engagement. I mean, my wife is 2 floors up, but when I've scheduled things with other people, I tell her, I say, I'm going to be involved with other people. Please don't interrupt me. And then that's a good idea for a segment. I should go over it and criticize G's part of that debate because he did poorly. I mean, he didn't even prepare, I don't think. He just thought he would come in and run a script, and it didn't work for him, and he failed. But yes, Jimbob, after looking over it visually, I do agree that Godless Engineer was being disrespectful to you guys. But I know on your show you can be disrespectful to people. So I think both of you, maybe you weren't in the wrong in that debate, but you have been in the wrong in other discussions I've seen you have with people. And then finally, was commenting about his interaction with a philosopher. So this is a common mistake I see among people, especially theists, that don't want to acknowledge degreed opinion that disagrees with them. So I pointed out that Stephen Hoyt has a bachelor's in philosophy, and Jimbob does not. He told me that one time, that he doesn't have any degree in a relevant field that whatever I was talking to him about was religion and history and all that, philosophy. So he said, you also appeal to authority, which is fallacious. Stephen could well be wrong, or appealing to his degree is fallacious. No, it's not. Appealing to experts in their fields is not fallacious. That does not mean that they can't be wrong. However, we appeal to experts all the time. We go to doctors, we go to mechanics, we have a carpenter come work on our house. We appeal to experts all the time in life. So no, it's not fallacious. You can look it up. Just search your logical fallacy is, and you will find appeal to experts, and you will find under it they say, this is not to mean appealing to people in their field is fallacy. And that's a mistake that I've not only seen Jimbob do, I've seen several people do that, and it is not a fallacy. What it is Stephen Hoyt can be wrong, but if you're, I feel like I said this last time, I think I did. If you're ignorant of philosophy, and you got Jimbob on one side who doesn't have a degree, and I don't know how much of an autodidact he is, and you have someone who has a degree in the field, it's not a fallacy to go with the person in the field. And I think that's, Jimbob doesn't give any respect to Hoyt's degree. And again, he wants me to call in, and he says he'll be nice. Maybe if I get something in writing, don't play your little games of gifts and all that, screaming Alex Jones. But any joke, your criteria is paying you, haha. Well, I didn't think you would. I just tossed that out. Hey, I'll take some money. You don't even have an audience. We all got to start somewhere. And I would rather have a small, thoughtful audience than a large audience that's going to get me money. So that's my position on this thing. I'm retired to do this for fun. If I ever make money at it, that'll be nice. If I don't care. And let's just, how do I want to put this? Let's just say I'm a smart person and maybe my word has value, and I would rather interact with people that might have valuable opinions, and then I'm only going to invite you on because you have a following and get me followers. I've seen his followers. I'm not impressed by any of them. So, okay. Here's a sound argument for God, because I told him there are no sound arguments for God. Here we are. Truth is absolute and conceptual. I don't know what absolute means. I don't know what P1 means. You'll have to elaborate on that, because I have no idea what you're trying to say with that. Concepts require a mind. Okay, we can grant that. Humans discover absolute concepts. Again, I don't know what this absolute stuff is. Do we discover them? I don't know. I have to think about that one. Absolute concepts, again, not knowing what that word absolute means, necessitate an absolute mind. Conclusion: God is an absolute mind. Okay, here's one problem. God follows from none of those premises. God is nowhere in the premises, so you can't conclude with that. Don't know what a mind is. You would have to demonstrate that God exists before you can use him in a syllogism for a syllogism to be sound. That's the problem. So your syllogism is not even valid because the conclusion does not follow from its premises, because God is nowhere in any of the other premises. You got to think of the classical. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Socrates is mortal. Okay, it didn't go, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is a man. Something like that. I can give you a valid argument that is not sound, that is better than this one. All fairies have wings. Jimbob is a fairy. Therefore, Jimbob has wings. Perfectly valid. The premises logically lead to the conclusion. In yours, they don't, Jimbob. So you want to address your syllogism, you got to redo it. You got to clarify what absolute is, what conceptual is. Truth, you don't even need P1 because you're just talking about concepts. Is truth a concept? In my world, which may not be your world, truth is a characteristic of propositions. A proposition is either true or false. I don't know what this truth is absolute is. It is true that I love my wife. Is that an absolute statement? This is just poorly worded, in my opinion. So yeah, it's not sound at all. And even if you fix it up, it's not going to be sound because you have to demonstrate that a God exists. And no one has done that. You do that, as they say, you get your Nobel Prize. So to be sound, premises have to be true. To be true, premises have to be demonstrated in reality. So that would be my thoughts on your syllogism. It's not sound at all. It's not even valid. It's awkwardly phrased. It has ambiguous terms. Don't even know what you mean by truth. So yeah, you got a lot of clarification and rewording. God has to be in the premises, but unless you demonstrate God exists, I'm going to say it's not sound. Because if God doesn't exist, the whole thing falls apart, right? You would have to demonstrate that minds, how and why a mind can exist without a biological body. Now, let's not get into all this AI stuff. We'll just talk about before computers. And those were created by biological bodies anyway, computers were. So you would have to demonstrate how, without evolution, without developing minds, without developing brain states, how a mind exists. You know, is God biological? Did he evolve? Does he have a physical housing? Yeah, you got a lot of questions to answer, in my opinion, Jimbob. But I do appreciate your reply, and I hope you reply to this. Hopefully we can work something out as far as me getting on your show. And yeah, I guess I should check the... No, nobody commented. So, did better than last time, only 7 minutes over. I don't think I have any live viewers. Hopefully some people will watch the replays. And I will hopefully talk with you in a week, make this a regular thing. Looks like Thursdays are bad. I saw a lot of other events going on. I don't know if it's regular or not. But so hopefully I can make this a regular thing and maybe get some live conversations going. Get James McGrath on. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate you putting up with me for an hour. I hope I've had something of merit and maybe something a little entertaining. And thanks for watching.